So you mentioned vaccines, and I know there's not a whole lot, with the vaccines, but I think it'd be good to kind of just talk about the 5-way vaccines, the distemper, hepatitis, what's all in those and kind of, why those vaccines are important. And then, any recommendations as far as I know you can add Lyme, to those as well. Is that something, for the sporting breeds? I mean, I do it for my dogs because we spend so much time out in the woods and undoubtedly, which I know we're going to get into flea and tick, I still pull ticks off my dog, so the Lyme for me is just an easy addition, into those. And I don't think a lot of people even realize that's an option.
Yeah. So, I mean, to that point though, as well, it's not for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Because, and so like, I practiced in northern Minnesota, which was a hotbed for Lyme and ehrlichiosis, that's now anaplasmosis. And that's all we did is treat dogs for those illnesses. Out here in South Dakota, we don't see Lyme. And so I own the dogs I have right now have never been touched by a Lyme vaccine, and the generation before them where the dogs that I had when I lived in Minnesota were. And so the big thing is knowing, what you have locally, and then also where you do a lot of hunting. And so if I, had a cabin in the Northwoods and lived in southern Minnesota, I would vaccinate for Lyme disease. But the fact that, I don't travel up there to hunt anymore, my dogs don't need Lyme disease, and we just don't see it here. And so the big thing is understanding what you have locally. And so your kind of standard are going to be your distemper, adenovirus, parainfluenza, and parvo. Is kind of the standard canine shot. And then, the additionals, Lyme, if you live in a Lyme area. And then the other big thing, especially for sporting dogs, is leptospirosis, which is a bacteria present in water. It used to be hunting dogs and farm dogs were kind of our poster children for leptospirosis. But with urban sprawl, it's been a while now, but there was a paper published that the highest risk factor for leptospirosis was living in a housing development that was like under 5 years of age. And so, as people are encroaching upon wildlife, we get the raccoons in the backyard, we get the possums in the backyard, and we see leptospirosis. And so it's interesting. That's a disease when I first moved to South Dakota, we just didn't see. I have literature from when I was in vet school over 20 years ago about, lepto, the reemerging disease, and you'd go to continuing education and, they talk about lepto, and we tested for a lot of lepto and just didn't see it. And then it's probably about 10 years ago, we had an outbreak in the winter, which didn't make sense to me because it should be a warm weather bacteria because it's in water. And then we had kind of a 2-year period where we didn't see much. And then about 8 years ago, we had a massive outbreak again. And now we see it quite regularly. And so we went from not having that in our vaccine protocol to now it's one of our standard vaccine recommendations. And so it's important to know, the diseases that you're going to encounter in the area you live, and then in the areas that you hunt as well.